Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to be here before you tonight. There's so much going on in this country, so many threats to our national security, and energy is one of them. And I am so proud to be a member of Congress with the freshmen that I've heard here tonight. They make the rest of us look good, and I'm so grateful for their discussion about energy. It doesn't make any sense to have more energy overall than any country in the world and then to pay billions, hundreds of billions of dollars to people, many of whom don't like us. They want to bring down this nation, and yet we're enriching them, actually engorging them on our money. And then we have a solution. One little part of the solution is a Keystone Pipeline. More oil coming from our friends in Canada, who actually are friends. They don't want to see this country taken down. They don't want to see this country attacked again like it was on 9/11. And then we have a hearing today on energy in our Natural Resources Committee. And we were trying to pass legislation out of committee that would allow us to provide more of our own energy. But the wrong-headed approach of this administration and some people on the other side of the aisle that is forcing us to pay billions of dollars to companies that have no good plan for producing energy, but a great plan sucking the money out of this administration, ready to throw it on any whim that they can say somehow is a green job. Well, it seems to be more brown in color from where I come from. But anyway, we voted today in Natural Resources to once again allow drilling in this tiny area out of the Arctic National Wildlife Area in Alaska. I know that there are some people, even from this body, who have been taken up by so-called environmental groups and taken to areas of ANWR that are beautiful and are certainly worth keeping pristine. Not taken within 100 miles of the little area that we passed today to allow drilling in. It's a tiny part of the area that Jimmy Carter, as president, set aside back in the 1970s to allow drilling because there's nothing there. There's not a tree, a bush, anything that's living in that area in the way of wildlife can't stay because there's nothing to sustain them. They have to get out of there and go to the pristine areas. That's why Jimmy Carter set it aside as some place we could drill. Yet the wrong-headed approach of this administration is to continue to put off limits our own natural resources. But that's only one aspect of things that are going wrong in this country with this administration. So tonight, I want to pay tribute to a great American hero who has been demeaned. A man who has spent most of his life as an American hero fighting for Americans to have freedom of speech, and yet being condemned and disallowed the opportunity to have the freedom of speech. He repeatedly, over and over, laid down his life, or was willing to lay down his life, to provide for the rest of us. That is Lieutenant General, retired, William G. Boykin. He's a former commander of the United States Army Special Forces. He was a founding member of the Delta Force. He's also known for his devotion to the Christian faith, which at one time in this country, in fact, for 99.9% of this country's history, it was considered a good thing to be a person of faith and devoted particularly to a Christian faith. Jerry Boykin, Lieutenant General Boykin, graduated from Virginia Tech in 1971 and received his Army commission. By 1980, he was the Delta Force Operations Officer on the April 24th, 25th Iranian hostage rescue attempt. Now, I've talked to General Boykin about that before. I consider him to be a friend. Something that I had heard back during my days in the service was something that General Boykin said was above his grade back then, 1979, 1980. It'd be interesting to hear someone from the Carter administration actually provide documentation of the actual decision to reduce the number of helicopters that would be utilized to go into Iran, to a staging area hundreds of miles inside Iran, meet up with C-130, other helicopters, other equipment rather, that was there in the staging area, and then from there stage the rescue effort that would go into Tehran and get our hostages. The story I would love to see documentation on, thing that I'd heard as a member of the U.S. Army years ago, was that the original plan had at least 12 helicopters that were going to be utilized to go into the staging area, but the Carter administration believed that it might look too much like an invasion. So the word was back then that we heard, the Carter administration ordered the 12 helicopters reduced to 8, so it wouldn't look like an invasion. And that there were those who were engaged in the planning who said, you know what, we need 12 because the mission must have 6 helicopters to go forward from the staging area. These turbine engines will cross hundreds of miles of sand, and we have to count on perhaps a 50% loss of helicopters coming to the staging area. And since we know we need 6, we want to start out with 12 so that we have a better chance of getting 6 to the staging area. We knew where the hostages were, and yet people in the administration, ultimate responsibility resting with the president, decided, let's take more of a chance with the people we are putting at risk, sending in as the Delta Force. Let's put them even more at risk by making them go in with fewer helicopters. And as those in Delta Force at the time knew, all they knew apparently was they get to the staging area. If they don't have 6 helicopters, then the mission will be aborted and they'll have to turn around and go back. And since they were ordered to come in with 8 instead of 12 or more, they got to the staging area with 5. These American heroes who were not given adequate resources to go in and rescue our hostages in Iran by an administration you would have thought understood and appreciated the military, but apparently did not adequately. Even though President Carter had been in the military, you would have thought he would have understood. They get to the staging area, there are 5 helicopters, and the mission is aborted. One helicopter, one explanation was when one helicopter pilot was trying to lift off, once they knew it was aborted, everyone was anxious to get out. And a helicopter started up. Obviously the sand swirls. It's easy to get vertigo, lose sense of direction, and the helicopter went sideways, cut into a C-130, and we left heroic Americans on the death floor in Iran, a terrible embarrassment. And to this former soldier, I didn't think it was an embarrassment to the Delta Force that was sent in. They were ready to fight and die, but their orders were to go in. They were sent in without adequate helicopters, and when the mission did not go forward, people lost their lives. But, as we know from the old poem, theirs was not to reason why, but theirs was but to do or die, do and die. Some of them did. I would have hoped over the years the lesson learned from Vietnam would have been not that that was not a winnable war. As our colleague here, Sam Johnson, could tell you, after 2 weeks of carpet bombing, after North Vietnam had left the negotiation table, 2 weeks of carpet bombing, they came back, and as the Hanoi Hilton prisoners were taken away, Sam said, one of the meanest officers at the Hanoi Hilton was laughing and said, "You stupid Americans, if you'd bombed us for one more week, we would have had to surrender unconditionally." Instead of being done in the 70s, that could have been done early in the 60s. The lesson of Vietnam should have been, we don't send our military men and women anywhere in the world on our behalf unless we give them the equipment to do the job, unless we give them the order to go win, whatever it costs, win and come home. That should have been the lesson. But it wasn't learned in Vietnam. And it apparently wasn't learned during the failed rescue attempt under the Carter administration. But these were American heroes who put their lives at risk for an administration that didn't fully appreciate what was involved. General Boykin, in February of 2003, received, he had 2 stars as an Army General, as commander of the John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg, and was about to interview with Rumsfeld, Secretary Rumsfeld, for his third star nomination. He had received 2 Purple Hearts, one for Grenada in 1983, the other for Mogadishu, Somalia in 1993. He was involved as a commander in the Black Hawk Down scenario. From 1978 to 1993, General Boykin was assigned in various capacities to Delta Force. With Delta Force, he oversaw the rescue of CIA operative Kurt Muse from a Panamanian prison and the capture also of Manuel Noriega, the brutal dictator who put him there, put Kurt Muse in that prison. In Colombia, our hero, Jerry Boykin, had helped hunt down the drug lord Pablo Escobar. He also hunted war criminals in Bosnia. He helped rescue hostage missionaries in Sudan. He tracked kidnappers in El Salvador. He spent 13 years with Delta Force and was, as I mentioned before, not only a founding member of Delta Force, but he was also ultimately later commanding officer. In October of 1983, Major Boykin worked as an operations officer during Operation Urgent Fury in Grenada. During a dawn assault to free some Grenada government officials held by the Marxist People's Revolutionary Army, Boykin was shot in the arm with a .50 caliber round, splitting the bone completely in 2. He was told he would never use it again, but almost miraculously, his arm healed, which Boykin again believed was a God thing. In October 1993, Colonel Boykin was in command of the Delta Force, tracking down militia leader Mohammed Farrar Aidid in Somalia, during which time the infamous Battle of Mogadishu took place. Some will recognize that is the Black Hawk Down scenario. That was the event. But April 1998 to February of 2000, Jerry Boykin served as the commanding general of the U.S. Army Special Forces Command Airborne at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. From March 2000-2003, he was the commanding general, United States Army John F. Kennedy Special Warfare Center, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In June of 2003, General Boykin was appointed Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence under Dr. Stephen Cambone, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. Lieutenant Boykin retired on August 1, 2007, and currently teaches at Hampton-Sydney College. General Boykin is the author of Never, A Soldier's Journey into the Crossroads of Faith and Freedom, and also Danger Close, a novel, as well as Kiloton Threat, a novel. General Boykin attended the United States Armed Forces Staff College, Army War College, Shippensburg University, where he received a master's degree. His badges include the Master Parachutist Badge, Military Freefall Badge, Ranger Tab, Special Forces Tabs. Medals include the Distinguished Service Medal, the Defense Superior Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, Legion of Merit with an oak leaf cluster. This is a real hero. Bronze Star, Air Medal, Purple Heart with an oak leaf cluster. This is an American hero, ready repeatedly to lay down his life for our right to free speech, to the freedoms we know and love. And yet, he was not so well treated. People thought it was inappropriate that a general would say basically the same things that Franklin Roosevelt did. Things like Franklin Roosevelt said in his prayer on D-Day, as he prayed on the radio, national radio broadcast. And during that radio broadcast, Franklin Roosevelt prayed for our troops against those forces of evil. I believe he used the word crusade in there. And yet, Franklin Roosevelt was never excoriated or crucified for the language he used in the prayer, because people knew he cared about troops. People knew that he cared about Americans having freedom. So they never went after Franklin Roosevelt the way they have come after Jerry Boykin. General Boykin was invited to speak at West Point this year. My understanding, he was going to be speaking to West Point cadets at our U.S. Military Academy, cadets who were Christians, about how a Christian in the service of the United States reconciles his faith, his commitment to God, and his commitment to country. I would imagine most of us who are Christians, who served in the United States military, had those inner questions. Some of us found answers in Scripture, found answers in wise counsel, and found a peace afforded through prayer. Wise counsel is what I get anytime I talk to General Boykin. This incredible man, this American hero, who should be an American icon, was told he really should withdraw his acceptance of the invitation to come speak, because West Point, our U.S. Military Academy, not the military, but the people that this administration put in place, were too embarrassed to have this American hero come speak to Christian cadets at the United States Military Academy, where we also have a correct czar who monitors such things and makes sure we don't offend the people who want to kill us and destroy our way of life. So pressure was put. Gee, the military academy, those in power, allowed to be there by this administration with the political correctness in full display, didn't want to withdraw the invitation. They thought it would be better if he backed out of coming. This American hero will do anything his nation needs him to do, and he did something that I'm not sure I would have done. He said, sure, you don't want me to come, I withdraw my acceptance, I won't come. He canceled. This American hero who has repeatedly put himself between America and harm is not afforded freedom of speech. United States Military Academy cadets, because of this administration's approach, surely must feel that, gee, it's not a good thing to be a Christian in America if you're going to really live your faith. It's not appropriate to wrestle with religious issues unless, of course, you're a Muslim like Major Hassan, because if you want to speak freely, in Major Hassan's case, of course, and the private who was ready to kill people in the service with him as Major Hassan did, this military, with this administration's overblown political correctness, would not even deal with the private who did the same kind of interview that Major Hassan, that's made the same kind of statement Major Hassan did. It's on the internet, basically saying if they make me deploy, I'll have to kill troops to avoid having to go face Muslims and possibly kill Muslims. For one of the reasons that we're not allowed to kill other Muslims, I'll have to kill Americans. What's wrong with this picture? Certainly wasn't a problem for the greatest American general, the greatest American leader in the history of the world, a general named George Washington. He believed so fervently in the same things that Jerry Boykin believed in. One point he issued an order that you couldn't take God's name in vain. His approach was, how can we ask God for blessings and protection with the same mouth that's taken his name in vain? I can assure you, when I was in the Army, that was not a standing order. George Washington is the only person in the history of the world. Just down the hall is depicted in a painting resigning. He did the unthinkable. King George couldn't believe it. He led a military in a revolution, won the revolution as head of the military, tendered his resignation, gave back all the power, and went home. Recently stopped for refueling in the Maldives Islands. One of the leaders during a luncheon, we were talking. He said, we have to concentrate about the possibility of a military coup. This man on the other side of the world said, because, see, we never had a George Washington who set the proper pattern here. George Washington was a man of faith. Anyone who doubts that can read Peter Lillbeck's book, George Washington, Sacred Fire. Well, there's an article today, or yesterday, from Todd Starnes. The U.S. Military Academy pressured a retired U.S. Lieutenant General to withdraw from speaking at West Point prayer breakfast after Muslims and atheists complained, Fox News and commentary has learned. Retired Lieutenant General William Boykin was scheduled to deliver a speech at West Point on February 8th, but late Monday, the military academy released a statement saying it decided to withdraw from speaking would be replaced by another speaker. However, a source close to the controversy told Fox News and commentary that Boykin was pressured to withdraw. Quote, "It was very clear they wanted General Boykin to withdraw," unquote, said the source, who asked not to be identified. And after you see what they've done to an American icon like General Boykin, you certainly understand why. Quote, "He asked them to rescind the invitation, but they were reluctant to do that, so he said he would take them off the hook," unquote. Teresa Brinkerhoff, a spokesman for West Point, told Fox News and commentary the U.S. Military Academy did not decide this for him. Nothing is worse than political correctness and mistreatment of military heroes than dishonesty in doing so. After a conversation with our chaplain, Lieutenant General Boykin decided to withdraw, is what she said in an email. Boykin, a former senior military intelligence officer, had been criticized for speeches he made at evangelical Christian churches where he said the American's enemy is Satan, that God had put President Bush in the White House, and the Muslim Somali warlord was an idol worshiper. That was enough to decide to try to destroy an American hero. Army Times has an article, Retired 3 Stars West Point Invite Draws Protest, all about the controversy. New York Times, General withdraws from West Point talk. The message is coming loud and clear to our military. If you're a Christian, if you're a person of faith, as demonstrated through George Washington's life and times, you better keep your mouth shut, or this administration and those who are in charge of political correctness will see to it that you regret being so. There's another article by Rebecca Long, The Holy Warrior, it's entitled. Another interesting article. This goes right along with this administration's zeal to avoid recognizing the enemy against us. We've already seen, as I met with, along with Dana Rohrabacher, Steve King, Loretta Sanchez, we met with Northern Alliance leaders, including General Dustin, the hero in fighting the Taliban. Now, these are Muslims. Some try to paint us as xenophobes, Islamophobes. Isn't it interesting? That term came as a strategy to try to scare off, embarrass, humiliate people who stood up for what was right against Muslim terrorists who want to destroy us, try to intimidate us into not using the word Muslim. For heaven's sake, we know there are Muslim friends. The Northern Alliance with our allies, they're Muslims. We talked about it. Met with some Baluchs from southern Pakistan, some leaders there. They're Muslim. They're our friends. They don't want to destroy us. They want to support us, and some of us want to support them. And yet this administration has such a wrong-headed approach to those who want to destroy our way of life. Can best be illustrated in this chart, illustrating political correctness run amok. The 9/11 Commission report was prepared in a bipartisan fashion before people knew that the Organization of Islamic States, Islamic Society of North America, CAIR, would make such a tax on those who dared to point out that even though it's not the mass Muslim population who are our enemy, there are those small group within the Muslim community who want to destroy our way of life. How can you understand and anticipate your enemy's actions, the enemy that has sworn to destroy you, unless you study what they believe and you understand what their approach is. And you understand that people like Ahmadinejad, we run out of time. Well, let me conclude by just pointing to this chart. In the commission report, 322 times Islam's mentioned, jihad's mentioned 126 times. Now, it is inappropriate under this administration to mention jihad. It's inappropriate for our justice, intelligence, state to talk about jihad. It doesn't mention Al-Qaeda. It doesn't mention Hezbollah, Hamas, Sharia. This administration has run aground, and they have brought their ship right on top of real American heroes. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
Thank you. Does the gentleman have a motion?
Yes. I move that we do now hereby adjourn.
The question is on the motion to adjourn. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. According to the House, stands adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning.